Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross of GeneaVlogger, and on today's vlog, this is part 1 of my 8 great-grandparents. In a lot of the recent comments I've been getting on a whole bunch of my videos, I've noticed people are asking about my own ancestry and my own genealogy. And while I have discussed this before in various vlogs, I thought I'd make this vlog about my 8 great-grandparents after I saw some really interesting tweets from David Lambert, who is the chief genealogist at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. David had put out tweets asking about everybody's 8 great, meaning their 8 great-grandparents. And it was really interesting to see all the various ancestors that people had, and seeing that some people, their family really on all sides came from just one specific area, and then for others, like myself, my 8 great-grandparents all have amazingly different stories. So on today's vlog, I will be discussing part 1, which will be going over my paternal great-grandparents. So first I'm going to be talking about my paternal grandfather's parents, David and Fannie Goldberg. My great-grandfather, David Goldberg, was born April 20th, 1866 in the town of Socorani, which was in Romania and has also been a part of Bessarabia, the Russian Empire, and is currently in present-day Ukraine. His wife, Fannie, my great-grandmother, was born likely around 1872, but in all honesty, she is the great-grandparent that I know the absolute least about, especially when it comes to her history. We have 3 different possible birth surnames for her. We know that her name was Fannie. She also went by Fega, which is a very common Yiddish version of the name. But we don't know if her birth surname was Baruch. It might have been Greenspan, and we've even seen a couple of other possibilities. But unfortunately, we have nothing that has helped us prove which one it is. I don't know how David and Fannie met, but we do know that they met in the old country. Their first child, my great-aunt Molly, was born around 1893, and they quickly came over to America just about a year later in 1894. Almost everything that I found about David showed that he worked mostly as a tailor, although he did have a couple of other jobs. In the 1920 census, he's listed as a motor home dealer, and in the 1930 census, he's listed as a collector for installment houses. David and Fannie had a total of 8 known children, 5 girls and 3 boys. One boy lived for only 3 days, and one of the girls was born stillborn. Neither of those babies had a given name in any records. Another son, my great-uncle Morris, died very young at just the age of 15. And because of that, that left my grandfather as the only surviving son of David and Fannie to grow to adulthood and have children. The 4 girls who grew to adulthood all had children as well. Unfortunately, Fannie died in 1920, and that's one of the reasons why so little is known about her, is most of her children were just kids when she passed away. Her oldest, Molly, was in her 20s, and she did have some other children who were in their teens and such. My grandfather was about 18 when she passed, but she did have a few children who were just babies. After Fannie's death in 1920, David ended up remarrying quite quickly to a woman named Rebecca. And this fact actually would end up confusing me for many years because Rebecca would show up in a lot of documentation, but it never indicated that she was a second wife. And I had a lot of trouble trying to find Fannie's death certificate, and I only found it eventually because I was able to actually confirm the address of where she passed away with the known address of where the family was living. The 1920s seemed to be a pretty rough time for the family as a whole. Fannie dying in 1920, then Morris dying in 1923 at just the age of 15. And it's even said in many family stories that David was not really the best character. In my family history of all of my ancestors, David has always kind of been looked at as somewhat of a villain in a sense in the family. One family story I've always heard was that my grandfather had actually run away from home because David was such a problematic person. David would eventually make his way out to California, where many of his children had moved to already. It's unknown what happened to his second wife, Rebecca. I actually haven't done a whole lot of investigation into that. David passed away on June 24th, 1942, after suffering from cancer for about 6 months. He is buried at the Home of Peace Memorial Park in East LA. Now we're going to discuss my paternal grandmother's parents, my great-grandparents Harry Ross and Pearl Waxman. My great-grandfather was born Harry Rosenberg somewhere in New York on February 26, 1887. Interestingly, my great-grandfather Harry is my earliest American-born ancestor. As well, on my paternal side of the family, he's the only great-grandparent who was born in America. All my other 3 paternal great-grandparents were born in the Russian Empire. I don't quite know where Harry's parents actually came from. We do know their names generally. His father's usually known as Benjamin, but also shows up as Bernard and Reuben Bear. And then his mother, who's mostly known as Beatrice, has also shown up as Jenny and Annie. So it's really hard to find that with the last name of Rosenberg as well. But we do believe that they came from Germany because they immigrated in 1878, a few years before the assassination of the Russian Tsar. Now, while Harry was born in New York along with an older sister named Minnie, his parents ended up moving the family down to Philadelphia when Harry was still just an infant. Harry's future wife, my great-grandmother Pearl, was born Pearl Vaxer in 1890 in Tulchin, Ukraine. Her parents were Isaac Vaxer, who was known as Itzko Vaxer in Tulchin, and her mother, Sarah Reamer. Pearl came from a very large family. She was one of the younger of 10 total siblings. The family moved to America in 1904, and for some reason, unbeknownst to me, and unknown to the entire family until I actually found records of the family in Tulchin, they changed their name from Vaxer to Waxman or Waxman. So the family became Waxman. Now, I'm not sure when my great-grandparents Harry and Pearl met, but it's likely that they met sometime around 1906 or 1907. My great-grandfather Harry got a job in January of 1907 working as a waiter at the Union League, something that I was actually able to confirm because the Union League's archivist was able to find employment records for my great-grandfather. And just a year after getting this job as a waiter at the Union League, Harry and Pearl were married on January 28th, 1908. Their first child, Fred, would be born just 9 months after their wedding in October of 1908. Harry and Pearl would go on to have a total of 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. Now, while working as a waiter, Harry decided to change his name from Rosenberg to Ross. A big reason being that there was a lot of anti-Semitism back then, and he served a lot of really well-known people who were also well-known anti-Semites. I wasn't sure how early he had started using the name Ross as opposed to Rosenberg, but the employment records that the Union League had for him had him as Harry Ross. So we knew that he had changed his name at least by 1907, or even if he hadn't changed his name, he was using the name Ross. One family story is that he had actually served President Taft, and when I contacted the Union League, they confirmed that Harry's employment records matched up with when President Taft had been at the Union League in Philadelphia. And I was able to actually then find newspaper articles describing that event. But Harry's career as a waiter would end up being a lifelong career in the hospitality industry. Harry would eventually leave the Union League in 1910. His employment records didn't indicate why he left, but we knew that from there he would end up at Cobbs Creek Country Club, and then eventually he would buy the property at the corner of Emlyn and Carpenter Lane in Germantown, Pennsylvania. This building was originally known as the Pelham Automobile Club and had been the host of the Jewish Cultural Center as well in the area. When Harry bought it, he added a lot of buildings to it, including a garage to park cars. He built the largest banquet hall in Philadelphia, and it stood as the largest banquet hall for many, many years. And it would be used by a lot of politicians and big businessmen and different people to host large events, as well as do big announcements. I found all sorts of newspaper articles talking about different announcements and different clubs holding their events at the Ross House. Another story that has been told to many members of the family, and many have said that, it was a very adamant statement, was that my great-grandfather, Harry Ross, was the inventor of Russian dressing. The story being that he had been working one day and someone came in and they said they wanted something different. So he thought, well, if they want something different, then I'm just going to throw some mayonnaise and some ketchup and some relish. And just thinking, I'll just throw all this stuff that doesn't go together. And supposedly that was how Russian dressing was created. Harry would own the Ross House until 1958 when he sold it to his son, Freddie. And that same year, his son then sold it to the current owners, who were part of the Irish Center of Philadelphia. And now the building is known as the Commodore Barry Irish Center. Harry would die just a few years later in 1962, and his wife, Pearl, my great-grandmother, would then move out with a few of her daughters to Los Angeles, where she would live until she passed away in 1982, 20 years after the death of her husband. Now that's it for my paternal great-grandparents, but I will be coming out with part 2, my maternal great-grandparents, very soon. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out. Please be sure to click subscribe and click that bell for notifications on future videos. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at GeneaVlogger. I'm the GeneaVlogger. I'll see you in my next video.